Anche perché Piaggioso è stato forse il maggior artefice del fatto che qui abbiamo un signor ospite, per cui lascio giustamente la parola a lui e buon divertimento a sto punto.
Eccoci qua. Allora, vi rubo ancora un minutino per una comunicazione di servizio e poi così aumento un po' la suspense perché mi sto pensando niente, una cosettina veloce. Intanto siamo al terzo meeting del VMUG, voglio fare un brevissimo riassunto. Siamo a un anno di attività praticamente, siamo partiti proprio così un po' a carbonara e ancora una volta abbiamo così aumentato anche i nostri skill nell'organizzare questo tipo di meeting, più le altre attività che stiamo ancora seguendo. Chi ci segue da un po' sa che siamo partiti anche sulla parte di comunicazione come abbiamo potuto, per cui siamo partiti con un gruppo LinkedIn, poi siamo partiti con il nostro sito VMUGIT, poi siamo partiti sicuramente anche sul forum della community ufficiale di VMware e abbiamo cercato poi nel tempo di dare un pochino più di coerenza per le comunicazioni, soprattutto poi su Twitter, sempre che rompere le basi, quindi se ci cercate ci trovate tutti i giorni. Una menzione particolare per il forum della community che è gestito praticamente da due che vanno a giocare, sono Andrea e Luca, che praticamente fanno un supporto H24, una domanda in 2 secondi avete la risposta e quindi sono veramente...
Devo segnalare a Andrea che Gazzi ha scritto 10 minuti fa che
Andrea sta rispondendo in questo momento, molto probabilmente, perché H24 veramente c'è una cosa. No, la comunicazione in realtà è questa, che proprio l'altro giorno il VMUG Headquarters ha ufficializzato finalmente invece il lancio del nuovo workspace su vmug.com/Italy e dovremo andare a raccogliere mano a mano di tutta la parte di comunicazione, per cui con le slide degli eventi, con il forum nuovo, con il polling, con i blog e quant'altro, quindi andateci, ci sarà un periodo di rodaggio, un attimo dobbiamo capire anche noi un po' come funziona, però insomma quello diventerà poi il canale prevalente ufficiale da cui coinvolgeremo anche per le prossime attività. Invece arriviamo al nostro ospite, Steve, che con un'operazione di intelligence del pianamento a Copenaghen lo scorso ottobre abbiamo incontrato durante il pranzo dei VMUG e quando abbiamo saputo che per caso fosse in primavera, poteva essere in Italia, in zona di Trento, ho detto, ma potrebbe essere che organizziamo un evento, proprio in primavera, proprio in un caso. E quindi niente, Steve è stato gentilissimo, ci ha risposto all'istante proprio nei mesi scorsi alle nostre richieste e qui oggi ci parlerà degli avanzamenti novità sul piano tecnologico di VMware, quindi a questo punto lascio la parola a lui perché sto crollando. Steve, so it's up to you. Thanks again for being here today and taking time off for your vacation, and of course we're very excited that you should.
Okay, thank you. È un piacere essere qui. Capisco italiano ma non parlo bene. Mia moglie è di Frascati e di cugino, è in Trento, fondazione Uno Tesla tecnologica. So I'll speak to English, but if you have questions, we can translate as well. So I enjoy coming to VMUG often. I like to see the rivalry between Italy and the Dutch. And I thought I would just share a little bit more about what we're doing, and then definitely have some questions with BJ on anything you'd like to talk about. So I will share some things that are not public also, so you have to keep it quiet. But you can talk about this anywhere you like. So first, I'm not sure if you've seen some of the latest numbers, but it's quite exciting right now. So there are more than, according to the latest analyst estimates, there are more than 55% of all servers anywhere are now virtualized. So very large numbers. But these are the fun numbers. So right now, you can't see very well, but we estimate a new virtual machine is powered on or created every 6 seconds, which is the birth rate in the US. So quite a lot of new virtual machines coming on. What's also exciting is that we now have, even on just the paid products, we have 20 million virtual machines in existence. So 20 million alive right now, many more if you include ESXi and the free versions. And this is my favorite. There's a vMotion 5.5 happening every second. And I was told that that's the number of airplanes that are in the sky at any given moment. so very active. But more importantly, what's happening is the number of people being trained, like many of you here, is growing quite a bit. And that's because of the job demand and a lot of the transitions that are occurring. And one thing that I focus on quite a bit too is working with our ISVs, the software vendors, to make sure that their software obviously runs and is supported, but increasingly they're customizing software for running on top of vSphere. And I'll share a little bit about that as we go forward. So I thought I would start with a fun picture. This is really what Paul Moritz gets up and tells us every single day. And it is about where we are today and about where things are headed as we go forward. So my job as CTO is to make sure that our products are the correct products 3 years from now. So it takes a while to find out if I'm wrong. But we really need to make sure that we are following the trends that are occurring. So most of you know this, but if you go from today's IT infrastructure to tomorrow, it's kind of obvious that things are moving towards more virtualization, more cloud. But what's also very interesting is how people change how they're working with their applications and their desktops as well. So today I want to spend more time on our desktop transitions and Project Octopus and App Blast, some of these terms you might have heard about. And I'll definitely answer a lot of questions on what we're doing in those areas. But what I prefer is to talk about what's happening at the company level. So I had fun with PowerPoint. You'll have to forgive me. But, the way that I meet most customers who have IT organizations around the world, they're facing something like this. That's a CIO. So as you know, traditionally, the business owners, people working in the company, have had to buy everything from their IT department. It was the only place that they could get servers or desktops or applications. But what I really think about is that the world of the cloud computing model has opened up the opportunity for things like software as a service. Certainly some places public cloud is very interesting, and increasingly discussions of platform as a service. These are new services not owned by IT, but they're very alluring. It's a pretty good picture, right? So the issue is that the money is now flowing and the attention is now flowing not only to their own IT department, but also to vendors outside of IT. And that's certainly is a way to get things done, but it's also quite a challenge for anyone who runs an IT department, who's responsible for security or is responsible for data, certifications. So really when I go out and meet with customers right now, I talk about the role of IT changing from a world where IT owned everything, really to where IT is a broker. You know, IT is the one that you go through, but you're still able to get services that run in your data center, or you could use your IT department to let you get to outside things. So this certainly applies for things like infrastructure as a service from a public cloud. It also applies for devices though, and I think everyone sees this quite a bit right now. They also want to be able to go out and buy different devices, but have IT help them work within their own environment. So I really talk about this as, at a very top level, how IT is going to change from being the one that builds everything to one that certainly builds and runs a lot of the infrastructure, but also brokers access other places. And this is really, as we talk about Horizon and vCloud Director, all of these are around helping them manage this split of where things are running. So I like the t-shirt as well. That's a VMUG t-shirt. So the real question is, how do I do this? What is the real notion here? And so really the focus for VMware over the last 13 years has been shipping originally products, but increasingly folks like Massimo and others are really focusing on the overall transition. How do you actually build clouds and how do you change even the organization of IT to be prepared for this? And it's a very big change going on. So I thought I would just go through a few examples here and then go into the priorities for the different product groups within VMware. But I always like to start with Ducati as obviously a favorite Italian company doing this. But also what's very exciting about Ducati is relatively small compared to Suzuki and Honda and the very big motorcycle makers. But they've actually really been able to move quickly into virtualization and have, as a result, been able to compete with the bigger Japanese companies and others using IT as a weapon. And ultimately, that is what I think everyone should be looking for. IT shouldn't just be a cost center. It shouldn't be that group that you don't want to ever call. They should actually be a group that adds value and helps you compete. And so, again, a very quick movement to 98% virtualized in 2 years, which I always use this as an example to companies that haven't started yet to really show them how to get going. Now, the other exciting part, the other part was the IT department had a lot of downtime originally. And as everyone knows, one of the real reasons to move towards virtualization is not just saving money, but actually things like HA and disaster recovery. And so they really have been tracking and reporting how well the uptime has worked since they moved there. So I love this story. There's several other stories, of course, in Italy, but this is the coolest one. So. Now, I wanted to just give you a little flavor for what we're doing across all of VMware. So I'm responsible for all of the product group direction. We have about 4,000 engineers that are all over the world now, mostly in Palo Alto, several in Europe, and quite a bit in Asia as well. And we talk about ourselves as focusing on 3 layers. And you might have seen this in various presentations, but the first layer, and the one that most people know about, is really around building a cloud infrastructure. And again, many of you know this very well, but I'll share a few of the highlights, and I also want to share what we're trying to deliver in our future releases. What is probably less of a focus here, and in fact less of a focus in most groups that I meet with, is how people are writing applications. But I want to spend a few minutes on this because it is, I'm very sure that this is something about 3 years from now that will be on a lot of people's minds, is how do you write future applications in this world? And then my personal favorite space, because I actually use it and live it every day, is really talking about how people use it. So when I get asked, what does VMware do? The way I think about it is that the notion of cloud computing is changing everything. It changes where you run software, it changes how you create software, and it changes how you consume software. So where you run, how you write it, and where you consume it. And that's a pretty broad agenda. It almost covers everything that you can do in software. But it is really the focus areas. So I thought right now I would just go into a little detail on each of these and give you a little look at what's happening. So the most popular area is around how do we run the data center. And again, I'm sure you spend a lot of your time talking about vSphere and vCenter and vCloud Director. So I'm not going to go over how those products work. I think you know that fairly well. But I do want to share what I've said is the priorities for VMware R&D for the next couple of years. So we have, as you know, a pretty big release coming out towards the middle of this year. Some of you I know have been beta testing it. So that'll be a very exciting release that adds a lot. We are working on 3 releases at any given point in time though. So we're pretty much done with the release that ships later this year. We're far along on the next one, and then we've started on the one after that. So we have to keep it going like that. It makes it very confusing for me because I don't remember which feature I can talk about. But let me call out some very interesting highlights. So the first one that I think is very important is how do we make sure that virtualization is good for every application? So right now we're definitely at a point where the traditional enterprise applications run well. Still the big area that we hit at most companies is ERP systems and SAP and databases. Those are still, people are not yet getting a lot of them over in production. But we're on the right track. The performance is in good shape. And with the exception of Oracle, we have good support statements from most places. SAP themselves will be rolling out a lot of large initiatives as an example there. So it is definitely the case where all of the existing applications are on the path from a technical standpoint. But I get really bothered when I meet companies that have created clusters that are set for specific applications. And so right now, maybe a quick show of hands, does anyone have a high-performance computing cluster in your organization? 1 or 2? And how about, is anyone using Hadoop today? Looking at Hadoop a little bit? So really if you go to some of the bigger, so I spend a lot of time on Wall Street where a lot of the advanced technology happens. Almost every bank has a virtualization cluster. Many will have a server and a desktop virtualization cluster, but every one of them has a very large cluster that they use for high-performance computing, or they have one increasingly for big data. And so we have a very big mission that you don't need to have different clusters. You should be able to have one large cluster virtualized and be able to run all of these application types. So we spend a lot of time in the kernel making sure that performance overhead continues to shrink, and especially around network latency and around storage. So I think, I haven't written my talk yet, but at VMworld, we'll announce a number of records in terms of how well you can do low latency networking. And that's important for things like message passing infrastructures. It's important for voice over IP. But we really want to make sure that all of the applications run very well on vSphere. So stay tuned for that. I should say also, it is VMware software, but a lot of it comes from hardware vendors who are now building things like SRIOV, if you've heard of that. Certainly Intel and AMD continue to add new features for us into their chips. So we'll be in very good shape, I believe, over the next few years so that people will run all sorts of applications there. The second one, this is the most important part. And in fact, I was speaking with my cousin earlier today, who does buy VMware software. He has to. But he has more budget than he has people. And so I started asking him, why would you use, he was looking at OpenStack and looking at KVM and other areas. But he found out that it would take him a lot more people to run these and get them set up in the first place. So what I asked him is, what sort of tasks do you do that require people? And this is something we try to do with almost every customer we meet right now. We ask, when does a person get involved with your virtual infrastructure? And as you see what we have today with vCloud Director, and especially what's coming next, as well as what's coming next with vCenter and all of these areas, automation is the real focus. Try to get rid of anything that a human has to do, and then only have humans involved when they need to be. So humans are not very good at repetitive tasks, and you shouldn't be. You should only get involved when you have to be. So I can't announce some specific things just yet, but know that pretty much anything that requires you to go to a spreadsheet right now, or that requires email to be gone back and forth, we're trying to automate that aggressively. Now, the next one is not really very aggressively taking off yet in Italy. Some countries are further into the hybrid cloud model than others, but we do think it's a very important part of the future. So as you know, the real focus is to allow you to build a private cloud, and vCloud Director is the main focus there. 1.5 today and more in the near future. That really is about letting people have self-service access to infrastructure, have them be able to just log in and help themselves, certainly have good billing built into it. All of these are part of enabling a private cloud model. But what's also happening very aggressively, and I'll share some of the companies working with us, is the build out of public clouds using vSphere, vCenter, and vCloud Director. So I want to make it clear, we do this for two big reasons. The first is to give customers an option where they can run the exact same virtual machines, use the same management tools, even have the same security policy. But it's also about making our software better. So I spend a lot of time with AT&T and Verizon and Colt and very large companies that are running 100,000, 200,000 virtual machines. And when we go to them, they really force our products to have more scale. And I can promise you, if something's not automated, they learn about it quickly because of the large numbers. So we also use the public cloud to help the private cloud product get better. But a lot of what I'm working on in the group is also how do you begin to connect them in interesting ways. And people always ask me, what does it mean to have a hybrid cloud? And almost any time you see a disaster recovery solution in place today, to me, that is the first hybrid cloud. You have two data centers that are connected in some interesting network and storage way, and you're able to have a policy that helps things move from one side to the other. So when I get asked about hybrid cloud, I think it's not just about some public cloud vendor and your local data center. It's even for companies that have two data centers or more of their own. How can you begin to use them more easily? So there's a lot of interesting things. At the end, we can talk about VXLAN and storage replication, but a lot of important technologies for how to connect different data centers together. And then the last thing I wanted to call out is some new investments that are not yet really talked about too publicly, but it certainly is the case now when you go out and you talk about virtualization, it always starts with server consolidation, a way to save money, but it very quickly moves to availability. So I'm very excited. We actually showed at the last VMworld how we figured out how to do SMP-FT. So if you're aware of fault tolerance, it only allows a uniprocessor today, but we'll make announcements relatively soon around how we'll be solving it for SMP. A lot of people don't use it today because their applications need the multiple processors, but we figured that out. We're also spending quite a bit of time with our partners on taking the HA functionality and moving it to know about software running within the virtual machine. So today, it's very nice if your hardware dies that you can automatically restart a virtual machine somewhere else, but what if your application dies? So a lot of what we're looking at is heartbeats for applications and automatically restarting within a virtual machine when you need to. So availability is going to be a very important part of the product announcements that we make headed forward. Now the security side is in the middle of almost everything. It was nice to see the 3 sponsors outside are in the security business. You can't talk about cloud without security being in the middle of it all. And one of the most exciting things I think we have going on is around vShield and how vShield APIs fit right into the virtualization layer. So again, you're going to see some very exciting announcements from VMware and also from our partners around how they're building new technology into it. And really, the way to think about this moving forward is that instead of setting up physical firewalls and moving intrusion detection systems around, we'll have them be deployed as virtual machines, and they'll fit directly into the virtualization layer that you put there. And then lastly, I just wanted to call out one trend that some of you may be hearing more about. And maybe a quick show of hands, how many of you are reading about software-defined networks? It's becoming quite popular, and there are a number of startups that are happening. Folks like Nicira and Big Switch, and even Cisco just announced a, what do you call it, a spin-in, yeah, a internal startup to create a business around software-defined networking. And I have to say I get very unhappy because there are newspaper articles that say Big Switch will be the VMware of networking. I always respond that VMware will be the VMware of networking. Because we are doing quite a bit in this space. And if you look at the total port count, the number of servers attached to ports in the distributed switch that we have, it is one of the top vendors of switches anywhere, including the physical switches. So you can rest assured that we have a very big focus on allowing software-defined networking to really work perfectly within your virtualized environment. And a lot of it you can see today, some of the beginnings of it. But you'll definitely see as we roll out VXLANs and even in the upcoming versions of some of our products, you'll see the ability to have a large flat network that is logical and that works across different environments, including across data centers. That's going to be a very big focus for us. So if anyone asks, you should say VMware is the VMware of networking. But some big announcements around that. VXLAN, if you haven't heard about it, it is a standard that we've created for allowing network packets to flow easily across multiple segments. So we encapsulate layer 2 packets within layer 3 for those of you in networking and allow them to be routed. So this is a way to create kind of VLANs as they were supposed to be, without the scale limits and without some of the restrictions. So stay tuned. There'll be, I guarantee, a number of announcements. I'll be making some in May at Herrod, which is a big conference, a big focus for us. Now, the next thing I wanted to call out is a little bit more on the marketing side, because I want to explain how we're thinking about the world right now. So in June, when we launched vSphere 5, we announced something called the Cloud Infrastructure Suite. And this is really more of a marketing term. Those of you that know our products deeply know that they don't fit as well together as they need to. Some of them have multiple databases, some don't look the same, some install differently. And what I can't stand is that Site Recovery Manager doesn't currently work with vCloud Director, as several examples. So what we are basically able to say is that we've created and acquired companies and led to a lot of individual products, but they don't work well enough together yet. So a huge focus for the company is really how do we make it become a suite. And Paul Moritz came from Microsoft, as many people know. He used to be in the middle of all of the big battles against WordPerfect and Lotus. And he used to talk about companies that had created entire departments that were choosing the right word processor for the company. Or they would go out and evaluate 1, 2, 3 versus Excel to choose the right spreadsheet for a company. And the way that Microsoft changed that world is by really making all the products fit together, and you could buy one suite that was for all of your users and it had all of their productivity needs built into it. It's not a perfect analogy, but that is what we're doing as we head forward. You'll see in the next releases and heading forward that the products really do tie very, very nicely together. They'll be sold together, they'll have the same installation process, that sort of thing. But the idea will be that every one of the products has to work much better together. And again, you'll see a number of announcements coming out around that. We'll also be adding, I'm going to spend a little time on VC operations and tell you how that fits into this as well. So maybe a quick show of hands, how many people have seen VC Ops? Oh, excellent. How many are using it today? Okay, great. More than I thought. That's excellent. So we haven't announced our financial results yet, and since there are cameras, I definitely can't do anything there. But I would say that VC Ops is very rapidly becoming the most adopted new technology VMware's ever had. And the point of this tool is to help you manage a very complex and fast-moving virtualized environment. In fact, people use this tool for managing non-virtualized environments too, because it takes a different approach to how you would manage tools. So many of you that have been in the industry for a while, you know that traditionally you've used ITIL or you've had change management databases, CMDBs, and you would try to track every change that happens to a system, and then you would file a ticket if something goes wrong, and then someone would go test it. Well, what we realized is that in this world that is a lot more dense, a lot more virtual machines that are coming and going, certainly things that are moving around, you can't use the traditional approach to management. So we acquired a really interesting company that was in Armenia, and have really built a lot of tools around that product right now to create the VC Operations Suite. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure people would love to show you a demo or explain it. But for me, I really think of it as doing two different things. The first is bringing a pretty simple dashboard view of how healthy things are. And health means that I have enough capacity, that things are up and running, and even that the performance is as it should be. So I apologize, you can't see it too well, but at the top, think of that as a very top-level dashboard. And the second thing it does is it warns you when things begin to look bad. And that's important. It's about when they might be coming bad in the future. And it does that by using some very interesting algorithms that take events from all over the infrastructure and do calculations as to what looks normal. And I think that's also a very important part about how the world runs. It's about what normal should be. And we do this by putting VC operations into your environment for, what is it, Massimo, 2 or 3 weeks? Maybe 2 or 3 weeks you have it in the environment, tracking how things are working. And it understands that at the lunchtime, things might go down, or at the end of the month or end of the quarter, things will go up. And it gets to know that that's normal so that it doesn't warn you when those happen. And that's really important. I asked a number of companies how many trouble tickets are filed during the course of the week. And it turns out more trouble tickets are always filed during the busy periods, during the end of the month or the quarter. If you can avoid those, then you can really focus on those things that matter. So VC Operations is really focused on that, but it also allows you to really dive in and find out where the problems are. So it's easy to provide a high-level view, but if you can't dive all the way down and find out what NIC is broken, or where the storage specifically is full, then you'd be in trouble. So it tries to do both of those quite well. You can definitely expect some more announcements around this as we head forward. And we'll be building a lot of our existing tools directly into the same framework. Things like billing and capacity management will fit directly into this exact same model. Now I wanted to give you just a quick update on the hybrid cloud world and where we are. So, are people talking about Aruba? So we actually have been working quite a bit around the world. The biggest providers of our highest end public cloud are now certainly Verizon and CSC and Colt in London and around Europe. We're also working, obviously in Italy, to have a few services that run all of the same software. I think people know Aruba had a few availability issues.
Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows that. Anyway, so we're happy to be working with them, I think in part because of availability, to provide a VMware-based service that they could begin to offer in the near future. Obviously, we're working with folks like Telecom Italia as well. No specific announcements today. But the idea is to make sure that Italian customers have the option to use a public cloud with the same security and availability and interfaces that they could create locally as well. So I am quite excited about that. It is very funny though. I spend time all around the world, and different countries have very, very different views of the public cloud. Most of Europe is really focused on the private cloud, almost all of Europe. But if you go to parts of South America or even parts of Asia, very much looking to a public cloud as well. So it just depends. And our goal is just to allow both of them to work and make them interoperable. So the other thing that we are spending time on right now is making sure that the management and the security model works across these. And I've been talking about this, actually I'm embarrassed to say I've been talking about this for about 7 years now. The notion that you would attach security policies to a virtual machine, and you should expect that the infrastructure enforces those policies wherever you're running. And 7 years ahead of time, but it's now beginning to work. So when you actually go to a self-service portal and you request a virtual machine in the future, one of two things will happen. Some companies will say, tell me what level of security you want for this. Do you want full firewalls? Do you want very tight virus detection? What sorts of things would you like in there? And then it will automatically create the virtual machine with that. But what more likely happens is that when IT sets up different virtual data centers, they will have security policies attached to them. So that if you're in the finance department and you request a virtual machine, it will always have certain levels of security in place. And if you're a developer, then you might not need as much security, so it will turn them off. So really think of us trying to make security attached to the virtual machine and something that you can't turn off. You shouldn't be able to turn off the firewalls or the virus detectors or anything like that. So a very exciting part of this. And for any customer who really wants to have a set of applications that can run either place, I think the notion of having security that looks the same is going to be one of the most important aspects there. Okay, so we've talked for quite a while about infrastructure. Am I doing okay for your time? About 30? Okay. It's a little hot here. So I want to talk about the next two areas, which, again, a lot of people don't cover as much as they do the core data center. But I want to give you a little flavor for them. So I'm going to go very quickly through how we see people writing applications, and then I'll talk about the fun stuff, which is how do we all use the applications as we head forward. So in the writing of applications, we really think of this as having 3 areas. Most people are out there today, most companies are running either .NET or Java applications. That's the most common way. Or if you're an older company, you have a lot of COBOL programs and much older applications that are out there. But there's a real problem as people head forward. There are all of these new things that you want from your applications. You want them working on your phone. You want them to be able to communicate with other services. So they need to be more service-oriented. Or in the case of COBOL, your developers are retiring. So you need to get away from the source code that you have. So for that reason, we think it's an important time where companies are beginning to think about really rewriting applications for the first time, in many cases, in 20, 30 years. But it's very hard to rewrite applications, especially ones that have been around and are core to the business. So we take customers through really looking at all of their applications, understanding what things you should just leave behind, and what things you should try to move forward. And then when you are moving forward, we try to talk about a couple of different ways you might want to. So I'm not going to go into this in detail, but really think about that as a top-level conversation for many CIOs is, how do I get rid of some of these applications? How can I move off of Unix or the mainframe where appropriate? And trying to give them an answer is what we do. So I'm going to talk about 2 ways that we're trying to modernize the applications. The first is for existing applications. And has anyone, did anyone hear about our launch that we just did last week for vFabric Application Director? Okay. So it is very interesting because the people that we talk to with these products are not infrastructure people. They are definitely people that focus purely on applications. But what we're trying to do for the first time is simplify how you deploy applications when you know that you're running a virtualized data center. So what we do in this particular product, and I would definitely recommend you go to YouTube and see the video or look at it, it's really focused on how do you take a complex application and make it very easy to deploy. So a lot of the applications that we run have multiple tiers. They're almost always 3, 4, 5 virtual machines. And most of the time they have a web server, an app server, and then some database, maybe some caching in between. So what we do with this product is really take the notion of a blueprint, which is how you use something like Visio to draw up how all of the different tiers. Oh, that's nice. If I ask for coffee, do I get a sorry. So what we're trying to do is allow you to create the logical topology of an application. So you literally drag and drop different pieces of software, just like Visio, and you connect them. And then what happens is that this actually gets stored as a database entry, as a blueprint, and then you can instantly deploy these very easily. And so the companies that are using this today have a lot of Java applications in general, and they actually have wanted to create these simple deployment models. So you press a button. Disaster recovery. Whoa. Perfect. So really what I want you to walk away with this product, it allows you to create a catalog of enterprise applications that are really simply defined. And then the point is, in one click, you can deploy it. It will automatically create the virtual machines, install the software inside the virtual machines, and then connect the networks between all of them. Now we're tying this moving forward also into a lot of performance monitoring tools, so that again, it can look at how this multi-tier application is behaving, and it can help you do interesting things. So my favorite demonstration of all time is where this heads. And it's around monitoring a complex application and then taking actions when the performance gets too low. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but to give you a flavor, if you notice that the database is getting too slow, we'll give it more reservation shares, or we'll use storage I/O control to give it more bandwidth so that it can go faster. If you notice that the web server is going slower, we can automatically clone virtual machines. And we have a built-in load manager that will pull them in and make them all work together. So where this goes, and this is not ready yet, but where it heads over time is you deploy an application, and then the management can be automatically handled over time. So it's a very exciting new space for us. Now, it was promised that I shouldn't admit that I'm an Inter fan. I hear that's bad for Massimo, but I'm actually a Lazio fan. But what I also want to share is just a little bit about what's happening in platform as a service. And I want to be really quick about this. But I do guarantee that 3 years from now, people will be talking about this as a new way to write applications. So we call this the incomplete platform as a service, incomplete PaaS. Does that translate as a joke? But what you're going to hear a lot is a lot of different ways of doing platform as a service. And these are things, if you hear of folks like Heroku or Force.com or Microsoft Azure, these are all flavors of platform as a service. But I think they have a lot of challenges for where we want the world to head. But I'll share what we're doing in VMware. So we've launched something called Cloud Foundry. And maybe quickly, has anyone heard of Cloud Foundry yet? Okay, good. So a fair number of people. Today, I think today is its 1-year birthday, or maybe it's in the next week or so. So we launched it relatively recently, but it already has well over 60,000 developers that are working on it, and quite a number of people that are developing and deploying applications. And it's important to think of it as two things. The first is it is an open source project that anyone can download and build. It is also a service that VMware is currently running that's free, cloudfoundry.com, where you can log in and create applications. The point of platform as a service is that people don't need to know all of the details about what application server is running, what version of Ruby is there. All the specifics take a lot of time. So if you can simplify it, you let developers just focus on writing the application and not all of the details. So it is about developer productivity. That's the focus for platform as a service. Now what we really want to focus on though is what we're calling open platform as a service. And open means three things. The first is that there are a lot of languages coming up right now. A lot of college students have never heard about the Win32 API or have never written a Linux system call in their life. They're learning to write in things like Spring or Ruby on Rails. or hundreds of new languages, Node.js, all of these are coming together. And we want to make it so that you can choose what language you write in without having an entire IT infrastructure behind it. Sorry, I should call that out. We even have .NET support now, which everyone couldn't believe that when we did that. The second part of an important platform as a service, though, is increasingly you write applications that leverage a lot of other services, mostly databases, message buses. They might automatically tweet when you do something. They might log into social networks. So we want to make it so that you write an application and you can very easily absorb other services. And then the number one most important part about what we're doing is trying to make it so that when you write an application, you're not locking yourself into running in one single place. So today, if you write a Azure application, the only place you will ever run an Azure application is in the Microsoft data center. If you write a Force.com application, you'll only ever run it in the Salesforce.com data center. So we thought it was very important to create an open framework that would run anywhere. So on day one, we actually showed Cloud Foundry running on Amazon EC2. And we've also worked deals so that it runs on Rackspace. I think some people have it running on Azure also right now. So this is something very important. You don't want how you write an application to dictate where it runs. Very important part of it. Now the other important thing that we thought was fun is that you actually would like to have developers be able to use their laptops also and be productive in that environment. So we also have a version of this called a microcloud, which is downloading the entire stack to a single virtual machine, and allows you to write an application on your laptop, disconnected, and then when you run in a big scale environment, you can upload it and it will run exactly. So I won't go into any more details now, but think of this as a very important compatibility layer. As people write new applications, we are attempting to make this the universal way that they write it, the modern operating system, if you will, that can run anywhere. And so a very important part about this is that we are doing this completely as an open source project with a lot of contributors outside of VMware. It is certainly the case that this will run a lot of places there is no VMware software, and that's very good. We want that to happen. A lot of people look at me when I'm crazy when I say that, but that is a big, big focus of this, is making sure it runs great everywhere else. So you'll hear more about Cloud Foundry as its birthday comes up and as we announce some new partnerships on that. So now let's spend the last section really on end-user computing and how things are playing out here. And this is one of the more interesting spaces, I think, because all of us live this on a daily basis. So let me do a quick look at how things look today for most companies. And this probably looks for your personal life, and in many cases, your business life as well. So I think we all know that the easy old days, all of us had a Windows desktop machine, and it was literally on a desktop. And mostly we used Windows applications. What I didn't fully appreciate until recently, though, is that it also was the place where policies from IT took hold. This is where you authenticated yourself. This is where you have your files running on a local drive or on a network drive. And it really became the place where IT could ensure that the right things are happening. But then we've had two real challenges for IT come about. The first has been the arrival of other applications, applications that are not Windows applications. This is software as a service, whether it be for mail or Salesforce.com or other applications. But it's also increasingly these mobile applications we're using for accessing our work environment. And it's also around data, which we'll talk about Octopus in just a moment. So we have all of these different things that are coming together that make the old world of a Windows desktop not the only way that you can manage things. And then, of course, I always look in these crowds how many gadgets there are. But obviously, we have the Windows laptops, but increasingly we have, of course, the tablets and the phones that are coming into the environment. So we started about 3 years ago believing this is how things would play out. And I have to say it's gone even quicker than I thought it would. But really, we're trying to provide a solution that allows you to use all of your applications and all of your devices, but still have IT have a chance of being safe as they do so. So that is the focus for Horizon. And we've announced a couple of products in this space, and I guarantee you'll hear a large number of other applications in this space soon, that are around giving IT, think of it as a giant switchboard in the sky that connects a user with all of their applications and their data from wherever they happen to be. That is the mission of this project. Now, that's where the future is, and there are some early products for it. But the key thing we're trying to do is get you from where you are today to this model. And so that's where we have a lot of the products that you've heard us announce so far. The first and foremost is really just thinking about how do I move application management and application stores into a central place. Has anyone here seen Horizon App Manager? Okay. So a lot of changes are happening very quickly here. The first version of this product was simply an enterprise application store, an app store, that allowed you to choose software as a service applications, but have single sign-on, all of them. So it would talk to your company's Active Directory, and it would use those credentials to allow you to automatically log into different applications. We've recently added things like FinApp into this environment. So you could not only go out to a website, but you could actually download and run a FinApp directly from there. And you can certainly imagine what happens from here, where you can get access to your view sessions, and you can get access to data in other areas. So we'll be making formal announcements around that as we head forward. But think about this ultimately, as an employee, this is the site that I go to get whatever application I want to run. And as IT, this is the place where we begin to put authentication and other controls so that I can have a safe environment. Now, a couple of things that exist today in fitting this are, how do we begin to bring these together? So maybe a quick show of hands, how many of you are using VMware View? Okay, so a lot more here. So it obviously starts with us trying to help people modernize their Windows deployment. And as you know, we compete a lot with Citrix on this space with different approaches to doing it. But we're really happy with View 5, and it's really been the thing that has changed, I think, the perception and the reality of VMware in this space, to having a very good protocol, being ready for multiple devices, and hopefully being something that people really rely on. So in Italy and other places, we have many, many thousands of virtual machines that are now running as VMware View. But what's been very exciting is to really see how people are using it, not just to make Windows more manageable, but for new environments. And as you know, we've been releasing clients for a lot of different devices. I have to say, we haven't published our announcements yet on this, but the View for iPad is really taken off all over the healthcare business. And this is one of my favorite areas to watch, because it actually is making patient interaction better for doctors. So in the US particularly, a lot of hospitals have standardized on this because medical software moves even more slowly than enterprise software. It takes a long time to get it certified, and it's a lot of work. So whether it's MRIs or X-rays or how drugs interact with one another, these are all Windows applications still. But doctors would like to be able to be in front of their patient and showing them their MRIs and showing them how drugs will interact with each other. So this has really become the way that doctors now work with their applications. They can take these applications in front of patients, but at the same time, they know all the data is staying safe in their own data centers. So one example of where this is headed, you'll see a number of good announcements of our next versions of View shortly, but some of the things to make sure you know, our top focus is on how you lower the cost of storage in a View environment. That is the dominant cost. Server memory becomes costly after that. But we're focusing on lowering the cost overall, and then continue to do quite a bit of work to make sure that the graphics interaction is excellent, whether you be on a wide area network or a local area network. We're pretty good right now, but continuing to focus on that. And especially as things like Windows 8 begin to become popular, we want to be ready to give a great experience there. So that's really where we start in this overall vision, is making Windows a little more modern and giving you access from anywhere. Now the fun things that we've been talking about are really around, okay, now that we have Windows coming through this, and now that we have software as a service through this, how do we focus on data? And I think everyone knows data is, I think it's the core of everything we do around security and around where things run. So I've been very excited to be using something called Project Octopus. And has anyone here heard of this yet?
Yep.
Fairly popular. So it's something I'm using right now. It's in a private beta, closed beta right now. I'm sure several people would like to try it out relatively soon. But it is actually a very, very important part of our strategy. And I always talk about this as Dropbox for the enterprise, because it lets people understand what's going on there. But it is really two things. It's the server that gives you policies and lets people have access to their own data. And then it's a set of clients that work on a lot of different devices, whether it be Android or Apple or Mac or Windows, and letting you have a very seamless access to your files. And the important part, I think as people know, is how it synchronizes and how it lets you share your files across the enterprise. So synchronized means that if I make a document on my iPad, it will magically show up on all my other devices when I want to get there. And sharing means that if I actually want to collaborate with a colleague on a document, then it will automatically be allowed. Now, the big problem with today's file sync and share systems are twofold. The first is that they're always residing in the public cloud, and a lot of companies would like data to stay on site. And then the second thing is that they don't have the rich policies that people are used to working with in the enterprise. For instance, making sure that people no longer have access to files when they leave a company, making sure that certain files can be destroyed after 30 days. Certain things like that are pretty key to this. So really think about that as what we're delivering with Octopus. It will be something that can run on your own data center or something that you could consume from a cloud partner, and then it will have rich controls in place. Now, the rich controls are something that I think are quite interesting. I won't go into a lot of detail here right now, but I really have heard a lot of interesting results here. And I want to call out something that is a little subtle but important. I get told all the time that the reason people like to use Dropbox or Box.net is so that they can avoid IT altogether. They have no controls to worry about. So when I go and I talk to IT departments about when they deploy this, if they deploy it and require you to always use VPN and have no access to anything, people will still skip this. So it is a combination of having the technology and then the right policies for the right groups. And that'll be a very key part of this. And then the last thing I just thought I'd call out and give you an update on, I have to say I've been talking about this project as well forever because we've tried a lot of versions of it. And that is really, what are we going to do for mobile phones and tablets as we head forward? And really the concept has been very interesting. It has been around how can we apply some of the things we've learned in virtualization, but to our mobile devices. And maybe a quick show of hands, has anyone heard of Horizon Mobile or MVP so far? A handful of people? So this is the much discussed topic of bring your own device, or what you also hear about as employee-owned IT, these trends that mean I no longer want to get my phone from my IT department. I'd rather go out and buy my favorite device, bring it into work, and have it work. And on the flip side, it's about the core IT department who has all of these employees coming in with new devices, but no way to control them, and no way to know who is on their network, or what software they have installed. So we got to thinking about this and thought virtualization kind of worked in the x86 laptop space for this. Why not apply it in this world? And it's taken us a very long time because we've changed strategies here quite a bit. But the model we have now announced, and that will be shipping next quarter in Europe actually, is called Horizon Mobile. And the idea is that I buy my phone and I bring it here. And in fact, I didn't bring a phone, but I left it in the car. But the idea is that I have my phone, I've gone here and gotten all my music, I have Facebook, I have all of these things on it. But I also want to use that same device when I show up at work. So the model is actually very simple. You go to the App Store, you download VMware Horizon Mobile, and it is an application that installs today just on Android. And then I bring that device to work, and I tell my IT staff what my phone number is. Over the air, they will push a work phone. So it is an entire Android stack, exactly like normal Android. And the difference is that that is running in a virtual machine and is completely isolated from your home life. Now, the only thing that you can do within that work virtual machine is access your work app store. So the enterprise is allowed to choose specifically what applications are allowed to run in the enterprise. And that makes them be able to do things like whitelisting and other important aspects of choosing apps. The second thing about the work phone when it's running is that it's completely encrypted on the device. So the entire virtual machine is encrypted, and all communication over the network is automatically routed through a VPN. So actually, I have to say I'm using this. I love not using an actual VPN. I don't have to put in numbers. It's automatically connected whenever you've logged into this corporate phone and used your password. So think of it as I think of it as a safe corporate bubble that lives on that device. And this is actually the user interface when you're running in the corporate world. You can, of course, customize it. But it's very easy to switch between the two. And we're doing interesting things such as when you could have two phone numbers. And when your work phone number rings, it opens up your work VM. When your home number rings, it would go to the other one. And really making it very intuitive. And now the number one question I always get asked about is, does this affect battery life or does the performance look good? And so that's what we've been working on for 3 years, is making sure that there is no noticeable overhead when you're running this product. So you're going to see a lot about this so far. We just announced in Barcelona at Mobile World Congress that Telefonica will be shipping it in Europe in the second quarter, so very, very soon. And I haven't heard them publicly announce which countries they'll be doing first, but it'll be Europe first, and then the US will be following with our first partner there, Verizon. And meanwhile, what we're doing is working with all the handset manufacturers to make sure that it will run on all of them, so that you do get your choice. So I'm quite excited about this. I think it's, it will be a good project and a good product for a number of use cases where particularly regulated companies want to keep data separate. But you can also be assured that there are a lot of other projects going on at VMware right now on other ways to bring your own device and have them safely accessed. And if you've heard about things like App Blast, that's where it really comes into play as well, how to consume applications left and right. So I believe that's a good way to end this morning's discussion, is maybe a quick look again at really thinking about what we're trying to do to change where and how we run things, a big focus on how people will write tomorrow's applications, and then lastly, how do we get to a world where you can get access to all of your applications and all of your data from whatever device you happen to be on. And I always laugh because people ask if we're going to run out of things to do, but if you take this as your agenda, I think we're never going to be finished. And it'll be quite an interesting time ahead there. So with that, maybe I'll open it up to some questions. And
Yeah.
I go there. So you talk about security policy attached to virtual machine. So the infrastructure, the cloud, should enforce this policy to this machine. And I see also the dual side of the problem, like the machine should be aware where it's running, because maybe some cloud will not be compliant with the policy, like a machine containing European data, let's say, migrating to Amazon. The machine itself should be able to be aware of what is running. So it's like, okay, I don't run here. Do you think this is an aspect that you will be considering your?
Yeah, very good question. If you couldn't hear, it was do the security, the built-in security controls, can they recognize either data or what applications are running to recognize when you're in compliance with laws? So I'll step back a little bit. I heard from a lot of European customers the day that the US Patriot Act sort of came into being was the day that public clouds were going to be springing up all over the world, because no one would want their data to be somewhere that had certain laws on it. But even if you go to different states or different countries, following the data is one of the most important aspects of choosing where you can run. So it's actually where you can run as well as what security policies are in place. So we actually have, RSA's announced a product that builds directly into vSphere today that uses something called DLP, data leakage prevention. And what this does is their particular version scans the hard drive and recognizes, if you wanted to, it recognizes anything that looks like a credit card number, or in the US, a social security number. And it will alert you which virtual machines have private data or data that you care about in them. And then give you a report about where they're running, so that you can correlate that with what security policies are in place and where it actually is running. And a number of our other partners, some of which are here, will be making announcements about that as well. So the idea really is, for me, is that is the core to everything an IT department has to do, is understand where things can run, based on either government laws or on their own laws that are running there. Very important part of the product strategy there. And I should say there are two types of data that people always look at. It's called data at rest, which means things that you have on a hard disk, or data in motion, which means an email or a network packet going out that has some of this data in it. And why I get so excited about security in the virtualized world is that the virtualization platform sees everything. I mean, it sees everything. So we have full access to that. And traditional vendors have had real challenges because they might just build a network device, a bump in the wire device, as they call it, that is able to see every packet, but it's very hard to determine what is coming through these packets. They spend all of their life trying to figure that out. But when you have this vShell layer, what I'm seeing very interesting startups and even big companies building are security tools that combine knowledge of the network with knowledge of what's going on in a virtual machine. And that is really the most important challenge for security vendors, is understanding the context of all these different things running. So maybe a longer answer than you wanted, but it is a very, very core part of what we're trying to do.
You talked about automation as an important matter for virtualization infrastructures, and I orchestrator is your key product in that scenario. You're going to be growing inside operating systems and applications just to broaden the scope of the whole automation stuff. The second question is, if you're going to buy Puppet Labs, and if you're not, do it.
So the question was, what are we doing with Orchestrator and to make automation work a little bit better? I didn't hear the second question. It was asking what we're doing with Puppet Labs, place to an investment. So I will just say, in general, the very top-level metric that I ask a lot of customers, and we have a whole program rolling out around what are the real metrics that matter in the future. And one metric that I care deeply, deeply about is how many virtual machines a single administrator can manage. And that is a very important way of measuring how much automation is in place. And so we use that quite a bit. So we actually track how people adopt our new products and how much better that makes that particular metric. Orchestrator is a very key part of our future. Orchestrator it's a tool that's come through a lot of different history at VMware, but it will be baked into all of our products heading forward so that you can do workflows and really create the approval processes and everything around all the different products. It also will be even more extensible, so we'll have products that are built from our partners that really fit into this core orchestration layer. So that is a very important part of it, and that is all built out of Europe too, so it's fun to come out here and visit that team. The second question, and I'll answer it honestly, was around Puppet Labs. We made an investment in Puppet Labs because we think they're interesting. We're actually looking at partnering with any tool that is used to actually create applications and send them somewhere. So Puppet Labs, and there's one called Chef also. These are kind of the cool new way of orchestrating application creation. And we wanted to learn how that market works, but we also want to make vSphere be one of the greatest places that they ultimately deploy. So we're going to look at everything, every tool that ultimately sends something somewhere, and make sure that it can send it to vSphere in a very good way.
Your point of view about the storage and storage in the virtualized environment, because we are talking about that before your speech, and so what you're thinking about
PSAs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just generally, what are we thinking around storage? And that's probably a whole presentation in its own right. But I will say, what is interesting is the move of all sorts of new storage types. Certainly people that are building every type of storage system that's clustered in new ways or that presents different sorts of file system activities on the front end. So we obviously are doing a little bit of work around a software storage appliance that's built into our system. You know, that today is focused directly on very small businesses that either can't afford or don't have the expertise to deploy shared storage. So that's a product that we have today that is important. But one of the things I'm most excited about is a set of new APIs that we're delivering. Have we talked about VAAI? Or is that public?
Yeah.
Anyway, there are a set of pretty deep APIs that you'll see coming forward that are really focused on how can you continue to automate and make sure that storage is used efficiently. But it allows all of the different storage partners we have to make sure that the value of their arrays can come through. And it will change really the speed and the performance at which we can do everything from dedupe to migration to compression. All of these different areas will be something that can be done very easily, but we want vSphere administrators to be able to do all of it the way that they're used to working with the system. So there are a lot of other things going on, but think about that as one of the core things that's happening.
Right. A number of enterprise applications are moving from clustering technology requiring shared disk to shared nothing environment. What do you think it might have happened to VMware, to vSphere?
To make vSphere be a shared nothing architecture? That's a great question. Absolutely, that's where we're headed. As to where it gets all the way over to that's going to take a little while. But the notion of a shared nothing architecture is what people certainly get to. You know, in fairness, there are a few reasons that you move to that. One is availability, and the other is for scale. And you know, the scale of our customers and what we're able to do with today's products and even the ones upcoming, you probably don't need scale out for any environment for performance reasons. We're making the software handle more and more virtual machines and clusters, et cetera. But people do like, especially our service provider partners, when they're really getting to large numbers or they want to have availability models that really scale out, they'll be looking for that. So I can't make any announcements now, but definitely it is the case that we're pulling together vCloud Director and vCenter to have a much more of a shared nothing architecture as we head forward. Any other Questions?
Okay.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ringraziare Steve per la sua presenza oggi. Please hear me, no? Please, like, for you. Yeah.
That's it.